Beginner's Woodworking Series, Episode 3, starts right now. What's up, guys? I'm Tim. This is New Craft Workshop. You have found Beginner's Woodworking. This is already episode 3 here in 2025.
Are you serious?
Each and every Friday, I show you guys a very basic blueprint to get out in your shop and make a really cool project using a very limited selection of tools. Today, we've got a really nice clock that you guys just saw on the wall. This thing is extremely cool looking, at least in my opinion. Hope you like it as well. It's rustic. It can hang out in your shop. Maybe even find a place for it in your home if it matches your decor. But yeah, this thing is really cool. So today, we're going to get right after this project. I'm going to give you your cut list, tool list. We're going to show you the finishing process and everything like we have been on the episodes of this year. So let's get after it.
Let's do this.
First thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our cut list. Now, we're only going to need 2 pieces of material for this project. We're going to start with a 4x4. I'm not going to give you any length here because we're going to go over the length in just a second, or the thickness of each one of these cuts. And then the second thing you're going to need is a piece of 1/4 inch plywood cut to 9 inches by 9 inches. If you're going to follow exactly what I'm giving you today, and you're going to use the clock mechanism that I'm going to link down below, the one that I'm using today, you're going to need a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. If you don't have 1/4 around your shop and you wind up using a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, you are not going to be able to use this clock mechanism. You're going to need something with a longer shaft.
That's what she said.
Or your dimensions are going to be different for your centerpiece. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. So, tool list right here. We're going to need a saw. We're going to have to cut this 4x4 to thickness. Each one of these pieces are going to vary in thickness between 5/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in that area. We're going to need a drill with a drill bit that is the size of the shaft of our clock mechanism. And then we are going to need some wood glue, and I think that's about it as far as our tool list. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about cutting our 4x4. We're going to need a total of 9 pieces, 9 of these squares. Basically, these squares are going to look like this when they are cut. We want this end grain showing. This is what's going to make this clock really awesome, and every single one you make is going to look a little bit different. The first piece that I'm going to cut is going to be my centerpiece. That is where this shaft is going to mount on the back of. Now, this particular shaft for this clock mechanism is 1 inch long. We're going to need to keep it a little short of that so that we'll have a couple threads for the mounting nut to bite onto. So the most that we want total dimensions here is going to be about 7/8 of an inch, maybe even a little short of that. So if we have 1/4 inch right here, the most we can make our first piece is going to be 5/8 of an inch long. So we're going to mark. Look, I actually have a pen handy today. I know that's a surprise if you watched this before. That's never happened. So we're going to make a mark right here at 5/8 of an inch. We're going to cut our first slice off of this at 5/8 of an inch. And then the remaining 8 pieces, we're going to eyeball, and it's going to vary a little bit. We can go a little thicker, a little thinner, but we want some dimension to this clock. We don't want all 9 pieces exactly the same thickness. We want them to vary so that it gives it a really distinct and unique look. So first thing we need to do is we need to cut our 9 slices, and for that we're going to head over to the miter saw. Hey guys, I know I've mentioned this to you before, but before we start cutting this, Base Camp Dust Masks, they are a show sponsor here at New Craft Workshop, but I will tell you, I brought them on board to be a show sponsor because this mask is awesome. It fits, it does its job, it is extremely comfortable, and you can breathe in it. And if you're like me, if it's not comfortable and you can't breathe, you're not gonna wear it as much as you should. So Base Camp Dust Mask, I'll pop a link down in the description as always. Let's cut this wood. All right, so our first piece is the most important. I've got this at 5/8 of an inch, and all I have done to make sure that all of my pieces are going to be varying is I have put a yellow mark here on my saw. That is at 5/8. So I know that this first cut right here is going to be at 5/8. My next cut, I'm going to scoot it over a little bit so it's a little thicker. The next one after that, I'll move it in so it's a little thinner. And I'll do that varying times to get my total of 9 pieces. Again, the most important cut is going to be our first cut so that we are at 5/8 of an inch. Let's get it going. And notice, because I am cutting such a small piece here, make sure we keep our saw down, let the blade come to a complete stop before we lift it up. A thin piece like this, as we do our cutoff, if we were to pull our blade up, it's possible that our blade, this could fall into the path of our blade. The blade could catch it, shooting this out. We want to be as safe as we can. Whenever we're cutting really thin slices off like this, let your blade stop. Let's get it going. All right, we're back from the miter saw. We have our 9 pieces cut, and I'm just going to give you a real quick idea of kind of how this is going to look. We're literally going to mount and glue these to our plywood backing, just like this, and this is going to give us our really cool step-looking clock, whatever you want to call it. Now, a couple of things. So we don't want all of our grain pattern to all run the same direction. It's not going to look right. So we're going to spin a couple of these around. We'll turn them around. We'll just kind of vary this a little bit here so that our grain patterns are completely random throughout this, as well as our thicknesses. I've got a couple pieces here that are really close in thickness. The only one that I need to make sure that I use for my center is my 5/8 piece, which as soon as I find that, there it is. That's my center piece. Everything else around it is going to kind of just vary. I want to make sure I've got some talls next to shorts and vice versa. I don't want anything overly symmetrical in any way at all. Now I'm just kind of randomly laying this out because the first thing we need to do is we need to get all of these pieces sanded. My saw cut them fairly smooth, but we are going to sand everything over before we get anything else done. So grab the sander and let's get after it. Now I am not going to use multiple grits here. I'm just going to use a 120. I'm going to go over this really well with the 120. That's going to be more than adequate for this particular piece. If this was a little bit nicer piece, this was something a little more decorative with some higher quality wood, we would go through a couple different grits to make sure we got a nice, really smooth finish. But I am going to sand not only the surface that we're going to see, I'm actually going to kind of rub over the edges as well to kind of give it like a little bit of a roughed up look. That way everything is not completely squared off. If you're doing this by hand, just take your time, sand a little harder and a little heavier in certain sections. It'll kind of give it the same look that I'm going for today. So mask, let's go. All right, everything is sanded, and we are going to, because of course I didn't mark it, I'm going to once again find my 5/8 inch piece right here, and we are going to find the center of this particular component as well as the center of this board. Now, for those of you who do not know, the easiest way to find the center of a square is going to be, if I had a marking device that was long enough, would be to go from corner to corner, and where the intersection is in the middle, that is our center. So I'm just going to kind of draw a line this way, rotate my board. We're going to go from corner to corner, draw a line this way. That is dead center of this particular piece. We're going to do the same thing for our center component that we're going to have facing outwards. And take your time on this part because you definitely want this to be centered. This is going to be your clock, the post of your clock mechanism sticking out. We don't want this off center because then our entire clock is going to be off center. Now, the mechanism that I have here that I will link down below is going to require that we use a bit that is the same size. I'm actually going to go a little bit over on the size of my bit. This is a 3/8 inch bit. I'm not sure exactly what this diameter is, but I do know that my bit is ever so slightly bigger than this shaft. We just want a little bit of play, and then we're just going to drill a couple of holes all the way through each one of these pieces of our material. And we are drilling into end grain, so be careful that your bit doesn't wander or jump around. Just make sure that your hole stays centered. And before we drill all of our others, we'll test it. That's going to be great. I think, like I said, this is a 3/8 inch. I have no idea what size that shaft is, but 3/8 is going to be perfect. Okay, we've got our holes drilled, and before we do any kind of assembly of our clock mechanism, we want to get all of our components mounted on our plywood. Once everything is on our plywood and in place, we're going to finish this, and we are going to be using some stain and some polyurethane today. So I am going to lay this out in a pattern that looks nice. Again, we want varying thicknesses as well as varying grain patterns, so just make sure you kind of make it look like it looks good to you. And if I'm being honest with you, that looks all right there. Actually, let's switch these around. Let's put a big piece in the corner. There we go. That looks great. Hopefully you can see this on camera. We've got some different heights here, and we've got our grain pattern running in all types of different directions. So all I'm gonna do is make sure that these two holes stay centered, and then we're gonna glue everything down. Once the glue dries, we'll get to finishing. All right, everything is glued in place. I need to let this rest for about an hour before we continue this process, so I'm gonna fast forward this, and through the magic of editing, as always, I'll be right back. All right, this has dried enough for us to get our finish on. I am using Colonial Maple. I want something really light that's gonna keep this kind of natural looking, and we're gonna put this on with a rag, and then we're just simply gonna wipe it off. I'm also going to, afterwards, we're gonna pop a coat of water-based polyurethane on this. I have a feeling this is going to wind up out in my shop, so I'm gonna poly this as well. But as always, we're just gonna take a rag and we're going to kind of rub this finish into our wood. Now, end grain is gonna soak it up pretty quick, so I'm gonna rub it in and immediately wipe it off. I don't want this to set any longer than one of these blocks at a time. If you want a different color finish or a different shade of finish, just you do you. What do we say here all the time? Make it your own. So I'm gonna rub this in, rub it off, all these pieces. Just make sure you get down in the cracks. And then once our surface is done, I'll follow up with the edges of this, and then this project will be ready for some poly. So let's get after this. All right, our stain is on. I am gonna let this set up for about 15 minutes. Should be nice and dry out here in my hot, humid February shop here in Houston. Yeah, it's already miserable out here, so eventually I'll get the sweat lines back like you guys saw last year, so yay for that. 15 minutes, I'll come back, we'll pop on our polyurethane, and we'll get those clock hands and our numerals, which I haven't even showed you guys yet. That is gonna make this clock complete. See you in a minute. All right, this has been sitting for a few minutes. It is time to put on some polyurethane. I am just going to brush this on because I know this is going out in my shop. This is not gonna go through the process it normally would, which is gonna be a coat, sand, another coat. I'm gonna put this on pretty heavy. Poly is gonna pretty much self-level, and if you've never used it before, yes, it goes on white like this. Once it starts to dry, it will get clear. So we're gonna do exactly like we did with our stain. We're just gonna put a nice coat on here, and then we're gonna let this dry. So polyurethane, water-based is going to maintain a little bit more clarity. Oil-based, just like oil-based paint, is going to yellow slightly. out of the box, out of the can, as well as it cures and ages. I don't know if any of you have ever used oil-based paint in your home. Over the years, it tends to take on a slightly yellow tint. Poly's going to do the same thing, so I prefer water-based poly. Again, we're just going to brush this on a nice thick coat. Don't worry about the whiteness. Again, as it dries, it's going to turn clear. And then once we get this on, we can talk about how we're going to make our numerals and get those mounted. So let's finish this up. Okay guys, so our polyurethane has dried, and now it's time to get our numerals put into place. Now, we haven't discussed this yet, but let me show you what we're going to use here today. And as always, make it your own. I am going to use this style for my numbers. You use your style. I'm using 1.5 inch long common nails, galvanized, and we are going to lay these out to form our Roman numerals. 3 nails for the number 3. For our X's and our V's, we're going to need an X at the top. Hopefully you can see this on camera if I don't drop it again. I have just bent a nail. We're going to put 2 of these together, and again, if I can hold these, that's going to form our X. I'll zoom in on this in just a moment with the camera and show you guys, but I'm using galvanized 1.5 inch nails, and the way we're going to mount these, let me show you exactly how this is going to go. We're going to take our hammer. We're going to inset these into locations with our hammer. That's going to cause the head of the nail to sink a little bit into the wood. Then we're going to drop a little dab of CA glue in there, hit our nail with some activator, put it in place, and that's going to be more than enough to hold these for our numbers. What we're basically going to do is, and here's a close-up. Now you can see this. I've bent a couple nails, and that's going to form our X for our XII for 12 and our IX for 9. If you're not familiar with Roman numerals, shame on you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our nail, we're going to grab our hammer, and we're going to give this a pop. I'm going to kind of lay this out so you can see how I'm wanting this to look. There's our 9. I'm just going to hold these in place. Hit the head of each of these nails. Make sure you don't hit your finger. That's going to create an indentation. That's where we're going to drop our CA glue. We're going to hit this with our activator, drop this back in place, and that should be more than enough to hold these nails in place. If we need a little bit more, I'm just going to drop another dab of CA glue down here, spray it with my activator, and these will be put in place. Let's get all of our numbers put in place. Once these are done, we'll get on to the clock mechanism in the middle. All right, we have our numbers in place. Going to use some CA glue here. This is the stuff we use out in our shop. I'll pop a link down in the description for this. We get this on Amazon. It's good stuff. It's so much cheaper than you're going to find at any of the specialty stores. And it does exactly what it's supposed to do. So again, we're just going to simply put 3 little drops of CA glue, 1 in each of these indentions we made. Hit our nails with some activator, drop them in place, and then you just need to hold these in place for about 2 or 3 seconds. When the CA glue sets up, these are going to be nice and firm. These shouldn't go anywhere. So we're going to repeat that for our other numerals, and then we'll get this clock face installed. So we've got our numerals in, we've got our polyurethane on, everything is stained, glued together. All that's left is to get our clock mechanism installed. Now, if you've never installed a clock mechanism, you do not have to worry about what side is up because the hour hand and the minute hand always rotate evenly. The only thing we need to do when we get our hands on is align the 2 hands up with each other, and then that will be 12 o'clock. So to get this installed, we're just going to slip this through our hole in the back. It's going to pop out the front. We're going to take the nut that comes with this, And we're going to get this threaded on. And this does come with a little tool here to get this put into place. I am going to choose this particular set. The one I'm linking down below actually comes with more traditional looking minute second hands as well as these more modern. I'm actually going to use these. We're just going to pop this on here. I'm going to push this down right at the 12 o'clock location, and this thing just kind of pushes into place. And if you have to, because of the height of some of these, you can play around with this. This is super thin. We can bend this slightly if we need to. And then we're going to pop on our secondary hand, which is the minute hand, and we just want to line that up to 12 o'clock as well. And again, we'll just kind of bend that out of the way. So there is our clock, and as you can see, let me zoom this back out a little bit. As we rotate the back, we have our clearance for all of our hands, and we have a really cool freaking clock here. So that's it. Project is done for the day. All right, guys, that's it. Let me know what you think down in the description about our project today. This is something that is extremely beginner friendly, but you could dress this up, I don't know, countless ways if you wanted to. Look, instead of using end grain from a 4x4, use a 1x4, nice wood. Use some poplar or go with a really nice hardwood like cherry or walnut. Maybe some curly maple. Who knows what you have in your shop. Take you some 1x4 material, cut it to squares, chamfer your edges, make this a little more clean and modern looking if you want to. We went for a very rustic look here today. I'm actually going to hang this up on the shop wall here shortly. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. As always, appreciate you spending a little bit of your time with me today here on our channel. And real quick before we go, if you are interested at all in supporting New Craft Workshop and you like what we're doing here, I'm going to pop a couple links down in the description. One is going to be to our Amazon store. We have an Amazon storefront that has probably about 8 different lists of items. Some are my favorite tools, some are beginner-friendly tools, some are items you should be saving money on out in your shop for everyday use. Once you get to Amazon, through the link below to my Amazon storefront, any shopping you do while you're there benefits our channel. Also, down below this video, there is a join button. We are offering memberships. All of the details will be available when you click that button. It's our way of asking you to give us a little financial support. And in return, we've got some really cool stuff for you, and you can check out all the benefits to each membership level once you click that join button and pick the membership level you are wanting to join. That's all I got for you today. Now I'm done. As always, appreciate you spending a little bit of your time with me. Comment, like, share, subscribe. That's it. We'll catch you on YouTube.